No employee could meet owner's challenge. Until a waitress solved the problem in 1 minute. The notification sound on Douglas Hartley's phone had become his personal nightmare. Every ping meant another angry review, another complaint, another nail in the coffin of what was once the city's most beloved restaurant chain. Waited 45 minutes for cold pasta. Never coming back. Service was terrible. Our server forgot about us completely. Food finally arrived but was stone cold. What happened to this place? Douglas stared at his phone screen in the back office of Red Oak Bistro's flagship location, watching his life's work crumble one review at a time. Just 6 months ago, people lined up outside his restaurants. Food bloggers raved about the perfect dining experience. Couples chose Red Oak Bistro for proposals and anniversaries. Now, getting customers to stay through their entire meal felt like a victory. The numbers painted an even grimmer picture. Customer complaints had spiked from an average of 2 per week to nearly 15 per day across all 5 locations. Wait times had doubled, sometimes tripled during peak hours. Last Thursday, a family with 2 young children waited so long for their kids' meals that the toddler fell asleep at the table, and they left without eating. Douglas Hartley wasn't just any restaurant owner watching his business fail. He was a meticulous former engineer who had spent 23 years designing precision systems for aerospace companies. When he bought his first struggling diner 8 years ago, he had applied the same methodical approach that had made him successful in engineering. Every process was optimized, every workflow calculated for maximum efficiency. Red Oak Bistro had become his masterpiece, 5 locations across the city, each one a testament to how engineering principles could create dining magic. The restaurants were warm and inviting, with carefully designed layouts that should have made service smooth and natural. The menus were perfectly balanced between popular favorites and adventurous options. The staff training program was comprehensive and thorough. But something had gone terribly wrong, and it was costing him thousands of dollars every week. The breaking point came on a busy Friday evening when Douglas decided to observe the dinner service firsthand. He positioned himself at the bar with a clear view of the entire dining room, armed with his engineer's eye for detail, and a notepad filled with blank pages that he hoped would soon contain solutions. What he witnessed was chaos disguised as organized service. Servers rushed frantically between tables, their faces flushed with stress and exhaustion. Orders were forgotten, mixed up, or delivered to wrong tables. In the kitchen, plates sat under heat lamps while tickets piled up in seemingly random order. Customers checked their phones repeatedly, their initial excitement fading into frustration and anger. By the end of the evening, Douglas had filled 12 pages with observations, but no solutions. The problems seemed to multiply faster than he could identify them. The next morning, he called an emergency staff meeting. "We're hemorrhaging customers," Douglas announced to the assembled team of managers, servers, cooks, and hosts. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to solving complex problems, but his eyes betrayed the frustration of a man watching his dreams dissolve. "I've been patient. I've been supportive. But the complaints are finishing us, and I need real solutions." The blame game started immediately. Sarah, the head server, spoke first. "The kitchen is too slow. We take orders promptly, but food sits back there getting cold while we have nothing to tell our customers." Miguel, the head chef, fired back without hesitation. "That's not true. We're cooking as fast as we can, but orders come in all at once, then nothing for 20 minutes, then another tsunami. We can't manage that kind of chaos." James, the general manager, tried to mediate. "Maybe we need to look at our reservation system. We might be seating too many people at once." "The seating isn't the problem," interrupted Lisa, the head hostess, defensive and frustrated. "We follow the rotation exactly like we're supposed to. The problem is servers taking too long to turn tables." Douglas watched this circular firing squad with growing irritation. These were the same arguments he'd heard in 3 previous meetings. Everyone had explanations, but nobody had solutions. "Enough," he said, his engineering mind shifting into problem-solving mode. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm offering $10,000 in cash, That's $10,000 to whoever can solve the problem that's costing me thousands every week. The room fell silent. $10,000 represented months of salary for most of the staff. Douglas continued, his voice gaining intensity. But that's not all. Whoever solves this gets a management contract. A real career opportunity, not just a one-time payment. You have 2 weeks to figure out what's wrong and fix it. The energy in the room shifted dramatically. Servers who moments before had been arguing with kitchen staff were now eyeing each other as competition. Managers who had been defensive about their departments suddenly saw opportunity. 2 weeks, Douglas repeated. Solve the problem that's destroying our reputation, earn $10,000, and change your career forever. As the meeting dispersed, excitement buzzed through the restaurant. Department heads immediately began forming strategy sessions. Assistant managers started scheduling brainstorming meetings. Even the dishwashers were talking about potential solutions during their smoke breaks. But despite all the animated conversations and grand plans, nobody noticed the quiet young woman in the server uniform who had sat in the back row throughout the entire meeting, saying nothing, taking no notes, but listening to every single word with the kind of attention that comes from understanding something others had missed. The challenge was set. The stakes were clear. And somewhere in Red Oak Bistro, a solution was already beginning to take shape in the mind of someone nobody expected. By Monday morning, Red Oak Bistro's back office looked like a command center designed by someone who had watched too many corporate thriller movies. James Mitchell, the general manager, had arrived at 6 a.m. to transform the space into what he proudly called Operations Command Central. 3 white boards covered every available wall space, their surfaces quickly disappearing under layers of colorful charts, flow diagrams, and sticky notes arranged in patterns that would have impressed a conspiracy theorist. Heat maps showing customer traffic patterns were taped next to complex scheduling matrices that looked more like mathematical equations than restaurant management tools. We need to approach this scientifically, James announced to the assembled team of assistant managers, his voice filled with the confidence of someone who had just discovered business consulting YouTube videos. $10,000 doesn't go to guesswork. It goes to data-driven solutions. Within hours, the corporate staff had contacted McKinnon and Associates, a restaurant consulting firm whose website promised to revolutionize dining experiences through advanced operational analytics. The price tag was steep, $3,000 for a 1-week intensive analysis, but James convinced Douglas it was an investment in victory. The consultants arrived on Tuesday like a small army of clipboard-wielding analysts. They wore identical navy blazers and carried leather portfolios thick enough to contain the restaurant's entire operating manual. Dr. Patricia McKinnon, the lead consultant, introduced herself with the kind of firm handshake that suggested she had optimized even her greeting for maximum efficiency. We'll be conducting comprehensive workflow analysis, Dr. McKinnon explained to the gathered staff, her voice clinical and precise. Every movement, every interaction, every decision point will be measured and optimized. By Friday, you'll have a complete operational transformation plan. The consultants spread throughout the restaurant like researchers studying an exotic species. They timed how long servers took to walk from kitchen to table. They measured the exact distance between seating areas. They interviewed customers about their dining journey experience and created detailed psychological profiles of ordering patterns. Meanwhile, the assistant managers had launched their own parallel initiatives. Rebecca, the afternoon shift supervisor, pitched her revolutionary idea during Wednesday's strategy meeting, a sophisticated scheduling app that would coordinate server movements using GPS tracking and algorithmic optimization. Imagine, Rebecca said, her eyes bright with technological enthusiasm. Servers getting real-time notifications about which tables need attention, optimized walking routes calculated by artificial intelligence, and automatic coordination to prevent collision points. The app demonstration looked impressive on her tablet, colorful icons moving across a digital floor plan like pieces in some futuristic chess game. The cost was only $1,500 for the basic package, with monthly fees that seemed reasonable compared to the potential $10,000 prize. Not to be outdone, Marcus, the evening manager, completely restructured the table assignment system. He created a complex rotation schedule that assigned servers to different sections based on customer volume predictions, historical ordering patterns, and even weather forecasts that might affect dining preferences. Tuesday evening light rain means increased comfort food orders in Section 3. Marcus explained enthusiastically, pointing to his elaborate charts. We can pre-position our strongest servers accordingly. The heat maps grew more detailed by the day. Dr. McKinnon's team installed temporary sensors that tracked customer movement patterns from entrance to exit. They identified bottleneck zones and efficiency dead spaces with the precision of traffic engineers designing highway interchanges. But as the systems grew more sophisticated, the actual restaurant service grew steadily worse. Servers, now required to follow GPS-optimized routes, found themselves taking bizarre zigzag paths that felt completely unnatural. The scheduling app constantly buzzed with notifications that interrupted their interactions with customers. Marcus's complex rotation system meant servers were assigned to unfamiliar sections where they didn't know regular customers' preferences. The kitchen staff, faced with new ticket organization systems designed by the consultants, became confused about order priorities. Food sat longer under heat lamps as cooks tried to decode the color-coded ticket system that was supposed to streamline everything. Customer wait times, rather than improving, actually increased. The Wednesday dinner rush became a disaster when the GPS app crashed, leaving servers stranded without their algorithmic guidance. 3 tables walked out after waiting over an hour for appetizers. By Thursday evening, staff morale had reached rock bottom. Servers who had been enthusiastic about the challenge now dreaded coming to work. The assistant managers spent more time updating charts and analyzing data than actually managing service. Even the consultants seemed puzzled by results that contradicted their theoretical models. Douglas watched this expensive chaos unfold with growing alarm. The consulting fees, app costs, and productivity losses were adding up quickly, but the fundamental problems remained unsolved. If anything, they were multiplying. Friday morning brought Dr. McKinnon's final presentation, 43 pages of analysis concluding that Red Oak Bistro needed systematic restructuring of operational paradigms through integrated workflow optimization. The recommendations included hiring additional consultants for implementation. 1 more week, Douglas announced grimly to his exhausted staff. 1 more week to find a real solution, or people are going to lose their jobs. The pressure was suffocating. But in the chaos of corporate overcomplication, nobody noticed that the same quiet server who had listened so carefully to the original challenge was still watching, still observing, and beginning to see patterns that all the consultants and their sophisticated systems had completely missed. Ava Moore had perfected the art of being invisible. At 25, she had worked at Red Oak Bistro for 18 months, always punctual, never complaining, never volunteering opinions during staff meetings. While other servers formed cliques and gossiped during breaks, Ava preferred to sit alone with a book or simply observe the world around her. Most people assumed she was shy or antisocial. They were wrong. Ava was a watcher, a natural observer who had learned early in life that you could understand systems better by studying them quietly than by jumping into the middle of chaos demanding attention. While the consultants measured walking distances with fancy equipment, and the managers drew elaborate charts, Ava had been conducting her own investigation using nothing more than her eyes and her memory. During every shift, she had begun expanding her attention beyond her assigned section to observe the entire restaurant operation like a silent detective solving a complex puzzle. What she saw was both obvious and invisible, simple and completely overlooked by everyone else. The problems weren't mysterious or complex. They were patterns, predictable, repeated patterns that created cascading failures throughout the entire system. Servers weren't just randomly inefficient. They were constantly crossing paths, creating collision points where 2 people would awkwardly dance around each other carrying hot plates or full trays. She watched Sarah bump into Marcus near the kitchen entrance at least 6 times during every dinner shift, causing both of them to lose precious seconds and sometimes requiring them to return to the kitchen to retrieve items they'd dropped or forgotten in the confusion. The kitchen wasn't simply slow. Orders arrived in chaotic waves because servers approached the pickup window from multiple directions, creating bottlenecks where 3 people would arrive simultaneously. Then nobody would come for 10 minutes. The cooks couldn't maintain consistent timing because they never knew when their prepared dishes would actually be retrieved. Table rotation wasn't following natural flow patterns. Hosts seated customers based on mathematical formulas rather than observing how servers actually moved through the dining room. This created situations where busy servers were assigned tables at opposite ends of the restaurant, forcing them to sprint back and forth while other sections remained underutilized. The more Ava watched, the clearer the solution became. It wasn't complicated. It didn't require apps or consultants or sophisticated scheduling systems. It required understanding that people move in predictable patterns, and systems work best when they follow natural flow rather than fighting against it. During her break on a quiet Tuesday evening, Ava sat in the corner booth that provided the best view of the entire restaurant. She had borrowed a red crayon from a family with young children. Their little girl had been coloring while waiting for their food and had left the crayon behind when they finally left, frustrated by the long wait. Using a simple paper napkin from the dispenser, Ava began sketching. She drew the restaurant's layout from memory, marking the kitchen, the host station, and each section of tables. Then she traced the current paths servers typically followed, creating a web of intersecting lines that looked like a traffic accident waiting to happen. Next, she drew new paths, curved lines that flowed naturally around obstacles, created one-way routes that eliminated collision points, and established logical pickup sequences that would allow kitchen staff to prepare orders in predictable waves. The solution was elegantly simple. Instead of servers randomly approaching the kitchen from multiple directions, they would follow a circular pattern, clockwise movement that would create natural timing for order pickup and delivery. Table assignments would follow the same flow, ensuring servers worked in logical sequences rather than jumping randomly around the dining room. Where dishes were plated in the kitchen could be relocated to create better flow. The current setup forced servers to reach across each other to collect orders. A simple repositioning would create a single-file pickup system that eliminated confusion and delays. The entire redesign took exactly 1 minute to sketch. Ava stared at her napkin drawing, wondering if she was missing something. The solution seemed almost too simple after watching weeks of complex charts and sophisticated analysis. But the more she studied her rough sketch, the more convinced she became that this elementary approach would solve problems that had stumped expensive consultants. She folded the napkin carefully and approached Marcus, who was updating his rotation charts at a nearby table during his break. "I think I might have an idea about the service problems," Ava said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus glanced up from his elaborate scheduling matrix, his expression showing polite but dismissive interest. He had been working on optimization formulas for hours and wasn't particularly interested in suggestions from someone who had never attended a management meeting. "Oh, that's great, Ava," he said with the kind of patronizing tone reserved for children offering to help with adult problems. "What did you have in mind?" Ava handed him the napkin with her crayon sketch. Marcus looked at it for approximately 3 seconds, long enough to see that it was a simple drawing rather than a sophisticated analysis, and chuckled. "That's creative," he said, clearly struggling to be polite. "I think what we need right now are more systematic approaches, though. Thanks for trying to help." He casually tossed the napkin toward the nearby trash bin. It landed half in, half out, the red crayon lines still visible on the crumpled white paper. Ava nodded quietly and returned to her section, saying nothing more. She had learned long ago that some people had to discover the truth for themselves, and arguing rarely changed minds that were already closed. But as she resumed her shift, Ava began implementing her napkin system in her own section, curious to see if her simple observations could actually improve the chaos that sophisticated consultants had failed to solve. Douglas Hartley had developed insomnia. For the past week, he had been arriving at the restaurant earlier each day, watching the dinner service with the desperate attention of a surgeon monitoring a patient's vital signs. Tonight was no different, except tonight, something was about to change everything. The evening rush was in full swing, and the familiar chaos was unfolding exactly as it had for weeks. Servers rushed frantically between tables, their movements creating the same collision points and bottlenecks that had plagued the restaurant since the crisis began. In the kitchen, orders piled up while food grew cold under heat lamps. The sound of frustrated sighs and clinking plates filled the air like a symphony of dysfunction. Douglas positioned himself at his usual observation post near the bar, armed with his notepad and stopwatch, ready to document another evening of expensive failure. He had already filled 3 pages with the same depressing patterns when something in his peripheral vision made him pause. Section 4, Ava Moore's assigned area, seemed different somehow. At first, Douglas couldn't identify what had caught his attention. The difference was subtle, like noticing that one instrument in an orchestra was playing a completely different song, but somehow making the entire performance sound more harmonious. He focused his attention specifically on Ava's section and began timing her table service. What he discovered defied everything he thought he knew about his restaurant's problems. While other servers struggled to manage 2 tables efficiently, Ava was seamlessly handling 6 tables without appearing rushed or stressed. Her customers weren't checking their phones impatiently. They weren't glancing around looking for their server. They were actually relaxed. Douglas checked his stopwatch. Ava had just delivered appetizers to table 12, taken drink orders from table 15, and cleared plates from table 9, all within a span of 4 minutes. Meanwhile, he could see Sarah across the restaurant still trying to locate the correct entrees for her single-occupied table. This wasn't possible. If Ava had discovered some secret technique for efficient service, why hadn't anyone else noticed? Why wasn't she sharing her methods during the staff meetings where everyone desperately sought solutions? Curiosity overtook Douglas's usual methodical approach. He abandoned his notepad and began following Ava's movements more closely, trying to decode what she was doing differently. The answer was remarkably subtle. Ava wasn't working harder than the other servers, she was working smarter. Her movements followed curves rather than straight lines, creating a flowing pattern that never intersected with other servers' paths. When she approached the kitchen, she arrived at moments when the pickup window was clear, allowing her to collect orders without waiting or creating bottlenecks. Most fascinating of all, she seemed to anticipate kitchen delays. While other servers stood impatiently at the pass waiting for orders that weren't ready, Ava would use those moments to refill water glasses, deliver bread, or check on other tables. By the time she returned to collect her original order, it was hot and ready. Douglas realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Ava had somehow solved the operational puzzle that had stumped expensive consultants and frustrated managers. She had found a way to make the current system work efficiently without requiring any changes to equipment, staffing, or procedures. But how? That night, after the restaurant closed, Douglas retreated to his office and pulled up the security footage from the past 2 weeks. He fast-forwarded through hours of chaotic dinner service, focusing specifically on Ava's section, looking for the moment when her performance had transformed from average to exceptional. The breakthrough came when he found footage from the previous Tuesday evening, the same night Marcus had dismissed someone's suggestion during his break. Douglas watched as Ava handed Marcus what appeared to be a napkin, saw Marcus glance at it briefly, then toss it toward the trash. The napkin had landed half in, half out of the waste bin, and Douglas could clearly see red markings on the white paper. More importantly, he could see that immediately after this interaction, Ava's movement patterns had changed completely. Douglas paused the video and stared at the screen. That crumpled napkin in the trash, it had to be connected to Ava's sudden improvement. But what could a simple napkin contain that had eluded teams of professional consultants? The next morning, Douglas arrived at the restaurant 2 hours before opening. The cleaning crew had emptied the trash bins, but he searched through yesterday's waste with the determination of an archaeologist hunting for ancient artifacts. After 20 minutes of digging through coffee grounds and food scraps, he found what he was looking for. The napkin was stained and partially torn, but the red crayon markings were still visible. Douglas spread it carefully on a clean table and studied the simple sketch. What he saw made him freeze. The drawing was crude, clearly created with a child's crayon on a paper napkin, but it was brilliant. In less than a dozen simple lines, someone had diagnosed every major operational flaw in his restaurant and provided elegant solutions that would require no expensive equipment, no complex software, no additional staff. The sketch showed how servers could move in circular patterns that eliminated collision points. It demonstrated how repositioning the dish pickup area could create natural flow instead of bottlenecks. It revealed how table assignments could follow logical sequences that worked with human movement patterns rather than against them. Douglas studied the napkin for 30 minutes, checking the diagram against his memory of the restaurant layout. Every suggestion made perfect sense. More than that, every suggestion addressed specific problems he had observed but couldn't solve. This wasn't just a good idea. This was a complete operational redesign that could transform the entire dining experience, drawn in 1 minute with a borrowed crayon by someone who had been sitting in his restaurant all along. Douglas looked up from the napkin and realized he needed to find Ava more immediately. The person who had created this napkin algorithm, the solution that had stumped everyone else, was probably getting ready for another shift, still invisible to everyone who should have been paying attention. The $10,000 challenge had been won by someone who hadn't even officially entered the competition. Douglas spent the rest of the morning studying Ava's crayon sketch with the intensity of a general planning a crucial battle. He made photocopies, enlarged the diagram, and began translating the simple lines into detailed operational changes. What had taken Ava 1 minute to conceive would require careful planning to implement properly. By noon, he had convinced himself that the napkin solution was either genius or complete nonsense. There was only one way to find out which. He called James Mitchell, his general manager, and requested something that had never happened in Red Oak Bistro's history, an after-hours trial run with volunteer staff. "I want to test a new service system tonight after closing," Douglas announced during the afternoon staff meeting. "I need volunteers, servers, kitchen staff, hosts. We'll run a mock dinner service using actual food and real timing. Anyone who participates gets paid overtime, plus a bonus if the test goes well." 15 employees volunteered immediately. The promise of overtime pay was attractive, but more importantly, everyone was desperate to find something that actually worked after weeks of failed experiments. At 11 p.m., with the restaurant officially closed to customers, Douglas gathered his volunteer team in the main dining room. He had spent the afternoon repositioning equipment according to Ava's napkin diagram, moving the dish pickup station, adjusting the host podium, and even rearranging some of the kitchen prep areas. "Tonight we're trying something completely different," Douglas announced, holding up the enlarged photocopy of Ava's napkin sketch. "Forget everything the consultants taught you. Forget the apps and the complex scheduling systems. We're going back to basics, but with a twist." He assigned mock customers to various tables, other employees and a few friends he had called to help with the experiment. Each customer would order real food that the kitchen would actually prepare, creating authentic timing pressures and realistic service demands. Douglas explained the new system. Servers would move in clockwise circular patterns through their sections. No more random zigzagging or straight-line rushes. The kitchen would plate dishes in a single designated area, creating a natural queue that eliminated the chaotic clustering at the pickup window. Table assignments would follow the circular flow pattern, ensuring logical sequences instead of scattered coverage. "It looks simple," Douglas warned, "but it requires everyone to trust the system even when your instincts tell you to take shortcuts." The mock service began at 11:30 p.m. Within the first 15 minutes, Douglas realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Servers who had been colliding with each other for weeks moved through the dining room like dancers following choreography they had never learned but somehow always known. The kitchen, instead of frantically juggling orders from multiple directions, settled into a rhythm that felt natural and sustainable. Sarah, the head server, approached Douglas with amazement in her voice. "This feels completely different. I'm not running, but I'm covering more ground. I'm not stressed, but I'm getting more done." In the kitchen, Miguel was experiencing his own revelation. "The orders are coming in waves, but they're predictable waves," he told Douglas during a brief break. "I can see the pattern. I can prepare accordingly. This actually makes sense." By the end of the 2-hour mock service, the results were undeniable. Food delivery times had improved by an average of 12 minutes. Server efficiency had increased dramatically without anyone working harder or moving faster. Most remarkably, the stress level in the restaurant had dropped to something Douglas hadn't felt since the early days when Red Oak Bistro was a single location with a small, harmonious team. Douglas was convinced, but he needed real-world proof. The next day, he implemented the napkin algorithm during the actual lunch service, briefing only the day's shift about the changes. He positioned himself at his usual observation post, armed with his stopwatch and notepad, ready to document either triumph or disaster. What happened exceeded his most optimistic expectations. Customer wait times dropped immediately. Orders flowed from kitchen to table with clockwork precision. For the first time in months, Douglas watched servers actually smile while working. Customers noticed the difference too. Conversations became more relaxed, complaints disappeared, and several people complimented the improved service. But the real test came during the dinner rush. Douglas held his breath as the evening crowd arrived. This was when the old system always collapsed, when chaos overtook careful planning and good intentions crumbled under pressure. The napkin algorithm held firm. Even during peak hours, the circular flow patterns maintained their integrity. Servers moved with confidence rather than panic. The kitchen maintained steady output without the usual bottlenecks and delays. Tables turned faster, but customers felt less rushed because their service was smoother and more attentive. By the end of the week, Douglas had compiled statistics that seemed almost impossible. Customer complaints had dropped by 70% across all locations where the napkin algorithm had been implemented. Average wait times had decreased from 43 minutes to 22 minutes during peak hours. Food waste had plummeted because dishes weren't sitting under heat lamps waiting for chaotic pickup. Most importantly, employee satisfaction had transformed. Servers reported feeling more confident and less stressed. Kitchen staff appreciated the predictable order flow. Even the hosts found their job easier when working with the new logical seating patterns. The napkin algorithm wasn't just working, it was revolutionizing everything Douglas thought he knew about restaurant operations. A simple crayon sketch had accomplished what $3,000 worth of consultants, $1,500 in scheduling software, and weeks of complex analysis had failed to achieve. The solution had been hiding in plain sight, drawn on a napkin by someone who understood that the best systems work with human nature rather than against it. 3 weeks later, Douglas stood before the largest staff gathering in Red Oak Bistro's history. All 5 locations had closed early for this unprecedented company-wide meeting. Servers, cooks, dishwashers, managers, and hosts filled the main dining room of the flagship restaurant, their faces showing curiosity mixed with anticipation. The transformation had been impossible to ignore. Customer reviews had shifted from scathing critiques to glowing praise. The local food critic who had walked out in disgust returned for a second visit and published a follow-up review titled, "Red Oak Bistro, a masterclass in operational excellence." Reservations were booked solid for the next month. But more importantly, the people who worked at Red Oak Bistro were happy again. The stress that had defined every shift for months had evaporated, replaced by the satisfaction that comes from being part of something that actually works. Douglas had prepared his speech carefully, but as he looked out at the assembled crowd, he felt the weight of a moment that would define not just the future of his business, but the culture of how his employees treated each other. 3 weeks ago, Douglas began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. I offered $10,000 to whoever could solve the crisis that was destroying our restaurant. I expected complex solutions from our most experienced managers. I anticipated breakthrough insights from expensive consultants. I assumed the answer would come from someone with authority, education, or seniority. He paused, scanning the faces before him until he found Ava Moore sitting quietly in the back row, exactly where she had been during the original challenge announcement. I was completely wrong, Douglas continued. The solution came from someone who never raised her hand during meetings, never volunteered opinions during strategy sessions, and never demanded attention or recognition. The solution came from someone who understood our problems better than anyone else because she was living them every day, watching them with the kind of attention that comes from truly caring about the work. A murmur of curiosity rippled through the crowd. Many employees still didn't know the full story of how the miraculous turnaround had happened. Douglas walked to the wall where a framed display now hung prominently. Inside the frame was Ava's original napkin, carefully preserved under glass, with a brass plaque beneath it. "This napkin," Douglas announced, "drawn in 1 minute with a borrowed crayon, solved problems that stumped professional consultants who charged us thousands of dollars. It eliminated inefficiencies that complex scheduling software couldn't fix. It created harmony from chaos using nothing more than observation, common sense, and genuine understanding of how people actually work." He gestured for Ava to stand. She remained seated, her face flushed with embarrassment at being the sudden center of attention. "Ava Moore," Douglas called directly to her. "Please come forward." Reluctantly, Ava made her way to the front of the room, her steps small and hesitant. She had never been comfortable with public recognition, preferring the quiet satisfaction of work done well. "Ava," Douglas said loud enough for everyone to hear, "you've earned the $10,000 prize, effective immediately. But more than that, I'm offering you the position of Head of Service Design for all Red Oak Bistro locations. Your job will be to observe, analyze, and optimize operations across our entire chain. You'll work directly with me to ensure we never lose sight of the simple truths that make great service possible." The applause was thunderous. Servers who had worked alongside Ava for months suddenly saw her in an entirely new light. Cooks who had barely noticed the quiet waitress realized she had been the architect of their newfound workplace satisfaction. But Douglas wasn't finished. He turned to face Marcus, the assistant manager who had dismissed Ava's napkin so casually. "Marcus," Douglas said, his tone measured but firm, "you're being reassigned to server training. It's time you learned to recognize good ideas regardless of where they come from." The demotion was swift and public, sending a clear message that would resonate through the organization for years to come. Douglas returned his attention to the entire assembled staff. "The napkin algorithm isn't just about restaurant efficiency," he said. "It's about remembering that the best insights often come from the people closest to the actual work. It's about listening to quiet voices that observe rather than loud voices that assume. It's about recognizing that genius doesn't always announce itself with credentials or seniority." He gestured again toward the framed napkin. "Every Red Oak Bistro location will display this napkin with the same plaque you see here. The message reads, 'Genius doesn't shout. Sometimes it just draws.'" As the meeting dispersed, employees approached Ava with congratulations and newfound respect. The quiet waitress who had spent months invisible to her colleagues was now the person everyone wanted to understand. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't Ava's promotion or Marcus's demotion. It was the shift in how Red Oak Bistro employees treated each other. Dishwashers found their suggestions taken seriously during staff meetings. Hosts discovered that their observations about customer flow were valued by management. Even part-time servers realized their ideas mattered. The napkin algorithm had solved the operational crisis, but it had created something more valuable. A culture where brilliance was recognized regardless of its source, where quiet observation was valued as much as loud authority, and where the best solutions came from understanding that sometimes the most profound insights are drawn in crayon on borrowed napkins. Ava Moore had changed more than just the flow of service at Red Oak Bistro. She had changed how an entire organization thought about wisdom, recognition, and the value of truly seeing the world around you.